High in the snowbound mountains, two wild wolves stumbled across a young boy, bound and left to freeze beneath the ancient pines. Instead of turning away, the wolves did something that would astonish the world. And when their secret was discovered, every witness was moved to tears. The mountains had always been a place of secrets. They stretched for miles, peaks shrouded in perpetual mist, forests thick with ancient evergreens, the ground blanketed in snow even as spring touched the valleys below. The silence up here was heavy, broken only by the distant cry of a hawk or the wind whipping through frozen branches. Few dared to venture so far, especially in winter, but for the wolves, the high trails were home. This pair, one gray, massive and wary, the other slender and black-furred with keen yellow eyes, had survived seasons of hunger, storms, and the threats of hunters who crept near the wild borders. They trusted no one but each other, moving through the landscape like shadows, always alert for danger or opportunity. On this particular morning, as dawn crept cold and pale over the peaks, the wolves moved silently along a narrow ridge, their paws barely leaving tracks in the crusted snow. The scent of pine and fox lingered on the wind, but there was something else, something foreign, sharp and urgent. The black wolf halted, ears twitching. A faint, desperate whimper drifted from a copse of trees below the ledge. They crept down together, muscles tensed. When they found the boy, even the wolves seemed to hesitate. He couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old, bundled in a torn jacket, wrists bound with coarse rope. His face was bruised, lips cracked and blue with cold. Tears tracked down his cheeks, freezing before they fell. His eyes, glazed with fear and exhaustion, widened as the wolves approached, but he could barely flinch. For a long moment, nothing happened. The world stood still, the boy too weak to scream, the wolves unmoving, breaths billowing in white clouds. Then the grey wolf stepped forward, nose twitching, inspecting the ropes with gentle curiosity. The boy shut his eyes, bracing for teeth or claws. But instead of attacking, the wolf circled, sniffing carefully. The black wolf joined, paws silent as the grave. She sniffed the boy's face, then the air, as if searching for another scent. Danger, perhaps, or the presence of whoever had left the child here. With a swift movement, the grey wolf pressed his powerful jaws around the rope, not the boy's skin, and tugged. The knots strained, then gave way. The rope slipped free. The boy's arms fell limp at his sides, and he collapsed into the snow, barely conscious. The wolves hovered, uncertain. The black wolf pressed her muzzle to his cheek, then gave a soft, urgent whine. The grey wolf nudged his shoulder, willing him to rise, but the boy could not move. A gust of wind rattled through the trees, swirling snow around the three figures. The wolves exchanged a glance. There was no food here, no shelter, only danger for both wolf and child. Still, the grey wolf lowered himself beside the boy, curling his thick body to block the wind. The black wolf followed, draping herself over his legs to share her warmth. Time passed, the morning deepened, and the cold eased its grip, if only a little. The boy, shivering between his unlikely rescuers, faded in and out of awareness. Far below, in the valley, a search party was forming, villagers alerted to a missing child, voices urgent, dogs barking as men loaded lanterns and blankets onto horses. But up here, none of that mattered yet. All that mattered was survival. And in that moment, for reasons no one would understand for days to come, 2 wild wolves became the boy's only hope. As dusk began to fall and the first distant shouts echoed up the mountain, the wolves raised their heads, ears pricked, bodies tense. The rescue was coming, but so too was a threat that would test every bond of trust between beast and child. The sky shifted from grey to indigo as the day wore on, bringing a biting chill that clawed through even the thickest fur. The 2 wolves stayed pressed against the boy, their wild instincts warring with something older, an understanding that this small, fragile creature needed them as much as they had ever needed each other. The boy, barely conscious, drifted in and out of feverish dreams. Sometimes he saw the wolves as monsters, teeth glinting, eyes cold. Sometimes, in rare moments of clarity, he saw them as guardians, silent, powerful, impossibly gentle. At one point, he stirred and managed a faint whisper. Mama. The grey wolf shifted, ears flicking at the sound. He gently nosed the boy's cheek, his warm breath a shield against the mountain air. The black wolf licked the boy's hand, tasting the salt of his tears, then curled tighter around his legs. Night deepened. Hunger gnawed at the wolves' bellies, but they didn't leave. From time to time, the black wolf would rise, scan the shadows, then vanish into the dark to scout the perimeter, always returning within minutes, bringing only reassurance that no threat was near. Down in the valley, lanterns flickered in the growing gloom. The search party trudged through drifts, calling the boy's name, their voices muffled by distance and wind. Horses snorted, dogs barked and strained at their leads, the whole village united by a single desperate hope. Up on the ridge, the wolves grew restless. The black wolf, ever watchful, caught a new scent on the wind. Smoke, oil, human sweat. She nudged her companion, and together they listened, a faint hum. Then the whirring engine of a snowmobile crawling slowly up the slope. The grey wolf stood, fur bristling, gaze fixed on the glow of distant headlights weaving between trees. He looked down at the boy, then at the black wolf, as if asking a question only she could answer. The black wolf crept to the edge of the clearing, blending with the darkness. She watched as two men dismounted from the snowmobile, their voices sharp, boots crunching on frozen ground. One carried a flashlight, the other a heavy stick. Neither seemed to be searching. They moved with the slow caution of hunters, not rescuers. The wolves recognized danger. These men were not with the search party below. They were something else, predators of a different kind. The grey wolf gently dragged the boy deeper into the shelter of a fallen tree, covering him with his body. The black wolf crouched low, ready to defend. The men drew closer, sweeping their light across the snow. Suddenly, the beam caught the black wolf's eyes, burning golden in the darkness. "There!" one man shouted. "That's one of them! Get the gun!" The black wolf darted away, drawing their attention and leading them in a frantic chase through the trees. She weaved and doubled back, vanishing into the shadows, all the while guiding the men far from where the boy lay hidden with her companion. The grey wolf held perfectly still, barely breathing, as the boy whimpered softly in his sleep. Every sound, a distant shout, a gun cocking, boots thudding against snow, sent shivers through his frame, but he did not move. Minutes passed like hours. Finally, the shouts faded. The black wolf reappeared, chest heaving, fur streaked with snow. She nudged the grey wolf's shoulder, signaling it was safe, for now. But their window of safety was closing. The boy's lips were turning blue again. The wolves knew that if they did nothing, he would not survive until morning. The black wolf did something then that she had never done in her wild life. She pressed her muzzle against the boy's ear and let out a low, melodic howl. It was a song of the mountains, a plea that carried down the slopes and echoed off the trees. Down in the valley, a search dog suddenly froze, ears perked. The handlers exchanged glances. Then, without warning, the search dog pulled hard on his leash and started running uphill, baying for the first time all night. The search party followed, stumbling through snow and brush, lanterns bobbing. Hope flared. On the ridge, the wolves pressed close to the boy, his heartbeat thready but present. Soon the shouts of the searchers grew closer, so close that the wolves could smell their breath on the wind. The black wolf looked at her companion, then at the boy, and in her wild golden eyes there was a question: stay or go? The first lantern lights glimmered through the trees. The wolves hesitated, torn between the instinct to vanish and the unspoken promise they had made. As a search dog's bark rang out, the world held its breath. What would the wolves do next? The shouts of the searchers echoed through the woods, every sound amplified in the hush of falling snow. The lanterns drew nearer, flickering gold against the icy blue of dusk. The lead search dog, a big mottled hound, bounded up the ridge, barking with conviction. His handler, boots clumsy on the uneven slope, struggled to keep pace. The two wolves froze, every muscle tensed. They pressed close to the boy, who now lay shivering but alive, his small hands curled into the grey wolf's thick fur. The black wolf watched the dogs approach, unsure whether to stand and fight or melt into the trees and disappear forever. For a long moment, Predator and protector stared at each other, the wild wolves. Battered by wind and hunger, the search dog, domesticated and trained but every bit as brave, and the boy caught between two worlds, unconscious of the miracle unfolding around him. The search dog slowed, nose twitching, reading the story written in scent, fear, blood, cold, and the lingering trace of the men who had come before. He whined softly, lowering his head. He recognized the difference. These wolves were not the threat. They were the reason the boy was still alive. The first human voices followed. "Over here! I see something!" Lantern beams swept through the trees, painting ghostly patterns on the snow. The wolves shifted, anxiety quivering in every line of their bodies. The black wolf inched backward, muscles taut, ready to bolt, but the grey wolf stayed, pressed against the boy, unwilling to leave him to fate. Suddenly, the boy stirred, a hoarse, broken sound clawing its way out of his chest. His eyes fluttered open, wide with fear and confusion. The wolves both looked at him, their gaze gentle, as if offering one last reassurance. Then, with a collective decision forged from something deeper than instinct, the wolves stood together. The black wolf nuzzled the boy's cheek in farewell, then leapt into the darkness, vanishing among the trees. The grey wolf hesitated a moment longer, looking back at the boy and the searchers, then melted silently into the shadows. Seconds later, the search dog bounded into the clearing, barking for the others. Human shapes burst through the undergrowth, 3, 4, 5 at once, their breaths pluming in the cold. "Oh my God, he's here! We found him! He's alive!" Strong arms scooped the boy from the snow, hands checked for pulse and breath, bundled him in blankets, pressed warm water to his lips. Someone radioed down the mountain, voices trembling with relief. "He's safe. We found him." I repeat, the boy is alive. But among the frantic rescue, one handler paused, scanning the snowy clearing. He caught sight of 2 sets of tracks leading away, larger than a dog's, spaced with a wild precision. He knelt, tracing the prints with gloved fingers. "Did you see?" he whispered to his partner. "Wolves? 2 of them. They were with him." The search dog pressed close to the man's knee, tail wagging slowly, nose pointed to where the wolves had vanished. It was as if he wanted to say, "They saved him, don't forget them." The boy, shivering in the arms of the rescuers, tried to speak. His lips barely moved. Wolves. They stayed. But his words were lost in the commotion. As the search party hurried down the mountain, lanterns bobbing like will-o'-the-wisps, the wolves watched from the darkness above. They saw the boy carried away, his head lolling, his face pale but alive. In the deep hush that followed, the grey wolf and the black wolf touched noses, a gesture of comfort and courage. Their wild world had changed, if only for one night. Far below, the village erupted in celebration as the news spread. "A miracle," people whispered. "A child returned from death's door." No one knew the whole story. No one, except the boy, would ever believe what had happened up there in the snow. And yet, even as the villagers cheered, rumors began to swirl. Stories grew and changed. Some whispered of guardian spirits, others of monsters who spared a child for reasons unknown. But the truth lay only in the silence of the mountains, guarded by 2 wolves and the bond they had formed with a lost and desperate boy. But as the boy drifted into sleep, safe at last, he clutched a tuft of grey fur still tangled in his mitten. In the hospital, as doctors gathered and questions began, the boy's only word was wolves. And somewhere in the forest, yellow eyes watched the lights below, knowing their story was far from over. The hospital was a flurry of relief and confusion. Doctors hovered around the boy, checking vital signs, examining frostbitten fingers, murmuring in disbelief at his survival. His body was weak, but his spirit, though shaken, had not given in to the cold. His mother, eyes swollen with tears, clung to him, thanking every power she could name. But the boy barely spoke. He only whispered one word, over and over: "Wolves." The authorities gathered in a tense huddle at the far end of the ward. The sheriff, a big man in a brown coat, frowned at the details in his notebook. No human tracks but the kids, no sign of a sled. Just wolf prints, 2 sets, and this. He held up the tuft of fur found tangled in the boy's mitten. Thick, grey, and unmistakably wild, a local wildlife officer, rugged and skeptical, studied the fur. If those wolves stayed with him, it's a miracle they didn't tear him apart. Maybe he got lucky. Maybe they just didn't see him as prey. But the search dog's handler shook his head. You don't understand. There were tracks all around him, all night. They didn't just spare him, they protected him. Word spread quickly in the village. By sunrise, everyone had a theory. Some whispered that the boy was blessed by forest spirits. Others argued it was impossible. No wolf would show mercy to a human, let alone a defenseless child. Some called it an omen, good or ill. The press arrived, cameras flashing, eager for a headline. The boy's parents, overwhelmed, shielded him from the reporters. But curiosity, suspicion, and wonder buzzed through every corridor of the small hospital. Her biologist from the university arrived, eager to take the fur for analysis. She interviewed the searchers, logging every detail about the tracks and the scene. If these wolves acted as guardians, not predators, it's unprecedented, she said to the sheriff. Wolves are complex, but this would change everything we know. Meanwhile, the boy remained mostly silent. Only at night, as shadows stretched across his room, did he speak. Soft, trembling stories to his mother, stories of golden eyes in the darkness, of warmth and protection, of two shapes pressed close in the cold. His mother, not knowing what else to do, stroked his hair and whispered, "Maybe they saw you were alone, just like them." Outside, snow fell gently, erasing the last of the searchers' tracks. But deep in the forest, the two wolves prowled silently, their senses on edge. They avoided the old hunting trails, skirting the edges of the human world, but they never strayed far from the ridge. The black wolf limped slightly from her escape, a fresh cut across her flank from a hunter's near miss. The grey wolf checked on her constantly, licking her wound, never letting her fall behind. On the second night, as the village lights twinkled in the valley below, the wolves heard a sound that made their fur bristle, a gunshot, not far from their hidden den. Hunters. Word of the miracle had brought more men into the mountains, armed with rifles and old fears. Some saw profit in a rare pelt, others revenge for lost livestock. All carried suspicion. At dawn, the grey wolf spotted them, a trio of men moving through the snow, rifles slung, voices harsh. They stopped at the very tree where the boy had been found. One man kicked at the blood-stained snow, cursing under his breath. "You see, wolves aren't angels. Sooner or later, they'll turn on us all." The grey wolf melted back into the forest, warning his companion. They would have to move, stay hidden until the danger passed. Back at the hospital, the biologist brought her findings to the sheriff. DNA confirms it. Wolf, not dog. But there's more. These wolves are unique to this region. The pack was believed lost years ago. If these two are all that's left, they're not just rare. They're the last of their kind. The sheriff's frown deepened. That means every hunter in the county will want a trophy, and every child will want a fairy tale. The boy, overhearing their whispers, felt a pang of dread. He thought of the warmth, the low howls in the night, the gentle touch of a wild nose against his cheek. He knew better than anyone that the wolves had not just saved him. They needed saving now. That night, while the world debated miracles and monsters, the boy made a decision. If the wolves could risk everything for him, he would do the same. He waited until his mother slept, then slipped from his bed, cradling the tuft of grey fur in his hand. In the darkness, he crept toward the window, heart pounding, determined to return to the mountains, to repay the debt no one else understood. The hospital was silent. The world outside swaddled in snow and midnight hush. The boy moved carefully, his small feet cold against the linoleum as he padded through darkened corridors. Nurses dozed at their station, lulled by the quiet shift. No one noticed the pale shape slip out the side exit, a hospital blanket draped like a cloak around his shoulders, clutching the tuft of wolf fur tight. The night air stung his cheeks, sharp with frost and distant wood smoke. Above, the sky shimmered with stars, the moon bright enough to turn the snowy field silver. He moved with purpose, following the memory of the path he'd been carried down only days before, up toward the mountains. He didn't make it far before exhaustion forced him to pause. His legs ached, breath misting in the dark, but he pressed on, driven by a stubborn, frightened loyalty. Every few minutes, he looked back at the yellow lights of the village, shrinking with each step. In the woods, the world changed. Sounds grew larger, shadows deeper, and every breath of wind seemed to carry a warning. Still, the boy called out softly, voice hoarse, "Wolves, it's me. I came back. Please." He stumbled on, hoping the wolves would hear him before someone else did. Meanwhile, not far away, the two wolves prowled the forest's edge. The black wolf, still limping, moved cautiously. The grey wolf's ears twitched at every sound, his nose constantly testing the wind for the scent of danger. Then, both froze. Beneath the trees, mingled with the bitter tang of human sweat and medicine, was a familiar scent. The boy. The black wolf whined low in her throat. The grey wolf slipped into the darkness, tracing the scent to a small figure huddled beside a fallen log, shivering but determined. The boy saw the silhouette and felt fear and relief crash together in his chest. He held out the tuft of fur, voice barely more than a whisper. "You saved me. Now I want to help you." The wolves circled him, wary but gentle. The black wolf licked his fingers, and the grey wolf pressed his warm side against the boy's back, sharing heat. The boy leaned against them, drawing comfort from their wild strength. But not all was safe. In the distance, headlights slithered between trees and harsh voices called out. The hunters had seen footprints in the snow, too small for a man, too deliberate for an animal. The boy pressed himself low, heart racing. The wolves, sensing the new threat, crouched beside him, bodies tense and eyes burning in the dark. Soon, the hunters reached the edge of the clearing, flashlights sweeping over brush and snow. "He's here somewhere," one man muttered. "If we find the wolves, we'll find the boy." The grey wolf nudged the boy, urging him deeper into the woods. The black wolf led the way, weaving through shadows, always checking that the boy could keep up. The hunters grew closer. Branches snapped under their boots. A dog barked, straining at its leash. Suddenly, the black wolf turned, facing the hunters head-on. She stood tall, fur bristling, eyes bright in the flashlight beams. She growled, a deep, echoing warning, a shield, a challenge, a plea. The hunters hesitated, startled by her courage. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, behind her, the grey wolf emerged, the boy clinging to his flank. "Don't hurt them!" the boy shouted, voice breaking. "They saved me!" The men lowered their rifles, confused and uncertain. One hunter, older than the rest, lowered his weapon entirely. "Look at them," he murmured. "They're protecting him." Just like before, the tension broke. The wolves stood still, not fleeing, not attacking, only guarding. Slowly, the hunters backed away, realizing they were not witnessing a hunt, but something much rarer, a truce. The boy collapsed in the snow, overcome by cold and relief. The wolves pressed close again, warming him with their bodies as the hunters called for help. Moments later, the search party arrived, drawn by the commotion. This time, the boy did not resist their hands as they lifted him up. He only looked back at the wolves, eyes shining with gratitude. The black wolf watched him go, her yellow eyes unreadable. As the boy was carried away once more, he locked eyes with the grey wolf. In that silent exchange, he made a promise to speak the truth, no matter who doubted him. Deep in the forest, the wolves howled, and for the first time the whole village heard them as something other than a threat. The boy awoke in the hospital, surrounded by worried faces, his mother, the sheriff, the wildlife officer, and the biologist who had tested the fur. His lips were cracked, his body exhausted, but a new resolve burned in his eyes. He gripped his mother's hand and spoke the truth as he remembered it. "The wolves saved me. They're not monsters. They're family." At first, the adults exchanged skeptical glances. The sheriff tried to comfort him. "You were lost in the cold, son. People see strange things out there." But the biologist leaned forward, voice gentle but serious. "Tell me what happened. Don't leave anything out." So the boy described everything, the warmth of the wolves, the way they shielded him, how they drove off the men with guns, how he had gone back because he knew they were in danger too. He told them about the black wolf's limp, the grey wolf's courage, the howl that summoned the search party. His words rang with a quiet conviction that even the skeptics couldn't dismiss outright. The biologist scribbled notes. If this is true, it's not only rare, it's historic. His mother squeezed him tight, pride shining through her worry. I believe you, sweetheart. But outside the hospital, the town's mood was divided. Some hailed the boy's survival as a miracle. Others demanded a cull, fearing the wolves would attack again. News crews descended, eager to film the wolf child and his story. A town hall was called. Tempers ran high as ranchers, hunters, and activists crowded the gymnasium. The sheriff tried to keep order. We're not here to debate the impossible. We're here to decide, do these wolves deserve protection, or are they a threat? The boy and his mother were given a seat at the front. The biologist presented her findings. The DNA confirmed the wolves' identity and proved they were likely the last of their line in the mountains. She urged protection. If we lose them, we lose a piece of this land's soul. A rancher stood up, voice trembling with anger. They might have saved the boy, but they killed my sheep last winter. Others shouted him down. That's what wolves do. But this is different. You heard the boy. The wildlife officer proposed a compromise. Radio collars for tracking, an emergency response plan, a moratorium on hunting until more was known. The crowd murmured, half hopeful, half suspicious. The boy stood, clutching the tuft of grey fur. If we kill them, we kill what saved me. I know you're scared. I was scared too, but they're not our enemies, not unless we make them. The gym fell silent. A reporter caught every word on camera. In the days that followed, petitions circulated. Emails poured in from around the world. Messages of support, offers to help, outrage at the idea of killing the wolves. The story had gone viral. Children sent drawings to the boy, pictures of wolves and boys curled together beneath the trees. One afternoon, the biologist arrived at the hospital with news. The governor's office has called for a review. There's a chance, the smallest chance, that the wolves might be granted special protection. The boy smiled for the first time since his rescue. He knew the fight was far from over, but he had allies now, people who believed his story, who saw the wolves not as legends or threats, but as living proof that the wild could be kind. But just as hope began to blossom, a grim warning arrived. El rancher found fresh tracks near his property, wolf tracks, and something else, human boot prints. That night, a trap snapped shut in the woods, blood staining the snow. The black wolf was missing, and the grey wolf was seen circling the edge of the village, howling in distress. Fear swept the town once more. The sheriff called the boy and his mother to his office. We can't stop everyone out there. Someone wants those wolves dead, no matter what the law says. The boy's heart ached with worry, but he refused to give up. I have to find them, he whispered. I have to try. His mother nodded, tears in her eyes. Then I'll help you. We all will. And so, as the winter deepened, the fight to save the last wolves and the truth of their courage became the battle of an entire community. But while the town debated and plotted, deep in the forest, the grey wolf howled alone, his voice echoing into the frozen night. The boy heard it from his window and knew, if he waited too long, it might be the last howl the mountains would ever know. The grey wolf's lonely howl threaded through the dark like a question with no answer. The boy stood at his window, shivering, not from cold, but from fear that he'd lose his only wild friend forever. The moon was a silver coin in the sky, and for a long time he stared at it, hoping for courage. That night, as his mother dozed in a chair by his bed, the boy quietly dressed. He packed a thermos of broth, a flashlight, and tucked the tuft of grey fur into his pocket for luck. Then, gently waking his mother, he pleaded, I have to go. The wolves need me. Please, Mom. She searched his face, torn between dread and pride, then nodded. We'll do it together. She bundled herself in a parka, grabbed a walkie-talkie, and together they slipped into the snowy street, careful to avoid reporters and neighbors. At the edge of town, the biologist was waiting. alerted by a late-night text. She handed the boy a radio collar. "If we can find the wolves, we can protect them, but we have to be fast. I heard gunshots earlier near the North Ridge." The sheriff joined them, grim-faced. "A few of us are still on your side, but there are men out there who won't listen to reason." The group trekked through the forest, guided by moonlight and the distant, mournful howls of the gray wolf. They followed tracks, wolf prints, mingled with boot prints and the drag marks of a trap. The boy's heart hammered as they crept deeper, the world narrowing to frost, shadow, and hope. At last, they found a splash of blood on the snow. Nearby, a steel trap lay empty, its jaws open and smeared red. The biologist pointed. "The wolf chewed herself free. She's hurt, but alive." The grey wolf's tracks circled the clearing, erratic with worry. The boy knelt, calling softly, "It's me, I'm here to help." At first, only silence. Then, from the brush, a low growl. The grey wolf emerged, battered and wild, his coat bristling with fear and sorrow. He looked at the boy, recognition flickering in his eyes, then glanced behind him, urging, almost pleading. The boy stepped forward, careful and slow. "Where's the black wolf? Where is she?" A shadow moved behind the trees. The black wolf crawled out, one leg bloody and stiff, her yellow eyes dull with pain. The boy ran to her, tears freezing on his cheeks. "It's okay, girl. We'll help you." "I promise." His mother crouched beside him, soothing the wounded wolf with gentle words. The biologist quickly slipped the radio collar around the black wolf's neck, her hands shaking with urgency. "There, now we can track her. Make sure no one hurts her again." The grey wolf pressed against his companion, licking her wounds and whining softly. Suddenly, the sheriff's radio crackled. "Shots fired near the west slope. Hunters closing in." Panic surged. The biologist whispered, "We need to move now." The group hurried through the trees, the black wolf limping but determined, the grey wolf pacing protectively at her side. The boy and his mother followed, helping where they could, while the sheriff kept watch for danger. They reached a rocky outcrop overlooking the valley. The wolves paused, breath steaming in the night air, ears twitching at every distant noise. The boy knelt once more, meeting the wolves' eyes. "Go. Find a safe place. We'll keep them away, I promise." As if understanding, the grey wolf licked the boy's hand, a rare, final gesture of trust. The black wolf pressed her muzzle to his cheek, eyes shining, then turned into the darkness. The biologist activated the collar's beacon, tracking the wolves as they melted into the wild. "We'll know if they're safe. We can watch over them from afar." The sheriff sighed, relief and sadness mingling in his breath. It's not over. But tonight, they have a chance. Back in the village, news spread quickly of the boy's bravery, the black wolf's injury, and the growing band of townsfolk who now believed their survival mattered. The governor's office promised to send wildlife officers to protect the area. National media told the story of the boy and the wolves, inspiring others to fight for animals on the edge of extinction. The boy finally slept, his mother's arms around him, knowing that for the first time since his rescue, the wolves had hope. But as dawn approached, a storm gathered on the horizon, and in the tangled undergrowth, fresh boot prints appeared. Someone was still hunting. The battle for the wolves' future was far from won. The storm arrived before sunrise, sweeping down from the high passes and smothering the mountains in driving snow. Icy wind rattled window panes in the village and scoured the forest, erasing tracks and cloaking every tree in a veil of white. It was the kind of weather that kept even the bravest hunters indoors, but this time the danger would not be stopped by snow alone. In the early hours, the sheriff gathered his small group, the boy, his mother, and the biologist, around a table in the station. Maps were spread, radios charged, coffee steaming in their cups. Outside, reporters huddled under tarps, hungry for updates, while townsfolk anxiously watched the hills for any sign of the wolves. "We've got protection orders in place," the sheriff said, voice gravelly with fatigue. "No one's supposed to hunt. Wildlife officers are on patrol, but with this storm, anything could happen out there." The boy fidgeted with the tuft of grey fur in his pocket, glancing at the map where the biologist tracked the collar's signal. The black wolf's movements were slow, sheltering deep in a stand of pines. The grey wolf never far from her side. The biologist tapped the screen. They're sticking to cover. The collar's working. But I'm seeing interference. Someone else is using a tracker out there. That shouldn't be possible. The sheriff frowned. Somebody must have stolen a receiver or built their own. We need to check the ridgeline, fast. Suddenly, a crackle burst over the radio. Wildlife Officer Grant, voice tight. Found a snowmobile abandoned near the North Woods. Boot prints recent. Someone's out here, armed. The boy's mother squeezed his hand. Who would risk the storm just to hunt them? The boy's answer was quiet, but certain. Someone who's scared, or someone who wants revenge. The sheriff geared up, taking the boy and the biologist in his cruiser to the trailhead. Stay close. Don't speak unless I say. If we find them first, maybe we can stop this before it's too late. They trudged into the snow, visibility shrinking with every gust. Branches groaned overhead, snow collapsing from limbs in muffled thuds. The boy scanned every shadow, desperate for a sign of the wolves or the hunters. Then up ahead, a movement. The grey wolf, barely visible through the swirling flakes, stood atop a boulder, hackles raised and eyes burning with urgency. He looked straight at the boy, then disappeared behind the ridge. The group pushed forward, heartbeats hammering. As they rounded the bend, a figure emerged, one of the ranchers from the town, rifle slung, face red with cold and anger. The sheriff stepped forward, hand raised. "Put it down, Bill, you know what's at stake." Bill spat into the snow. "Those wolves are killers. You protect them. You're betraying your own." The biologist, voice trembling, pleaded, "They're the last of their kind. The boy, he owes his life to them." But Bill only shook his head, lifting the rifle. "Doesn't matter. Some things are better off gone." Suddenly, a growl split the air. The black wolf, limping but fierce, appeared at the edge of the clearing, teeth bared. The grey wolf joined her, standing between the humans and the hunter. Bill aimed, finger tightening on the trigger. "No!" the boy shouted, lunging forward. The sheriff tackled Bill, sending the rifle skittering into the snow. The biologist and the boy's mother rushed to pull the boy back. The grey wolf stood his ground, not fleeing, not attacking, just watching. As the wind howled and snow swirled, Bill struggled in the sheriff's grasp. "You think this is over?" he spat. "Someone will finish what I started." But the sheriff cuffed him and called for backup. "Not today, and not in this town." In the aftermath, the boy collapsed in the snow, tears and relief mingling on his cheeks. The grey wolf padded close, pressing his warm body against the boy one last time. The black wolf touched her nose to his hand, eyes bright and sorrowful. The boy whispered, "Go. Be safe." And with a final lingering look, the wolves vanished into the whiteout, their shapes swallowed by the storm. Back in the village, word spread quickly. The wolves were gone, the hunter arrested, and a new respect blossomed in the hearts of many. For the first time, the mountain people spoke not of fear, but of gratitude for what they almost lost, and what, by courage and grace, they had managed to save. But as the storm finally broke and sunlight glittered on untouched snow, the biologist checked her receiver and frowned. The collar's signal was fading, farther and farther from the mountains. The wolves were heading for unknown lands, beyond anyone's protection, and their fate was uncertain. The storm passed, leaving the world silent and gleaming. Sunlight spilled across the mountains, turning every tree into a pillar of light. In the village, life slowly returned to normal. Children played in the snow. Reporters packed their vans, and neighbors nodded to each other with a new, quiet respect. But for the boy, normal had changed forever. He spent hours at the window, eyes on the horizon, longing for a glimpse of his wild friends. The biologist visited daily, sharing updates from the tracking collar. "They're moving east," she'd say, showing him a map with a glowing dot that grew fainter every day. "They're crossing valleys, rivers, and roads. It's almost as if they know where it's safe." The sheriff kept his promise. No more hunting, not while he wore the badge. The governor signed an order, making it illegal to harm any wolf in the region. But all this protection came too late. The wolves were gone, slipping further from the world of humans with every passing hour. At first, the news brought hope. Maybe out there the wolves could find new territory, start again. But as the days passed, the signal weakened, then flickered out entirely. Lost in a distant forest, far beyond the map's edge, the boy mourned quietly, his bond with the wolves like a secret language, a story he replayed each night in dreams. Sometimes he heard their howls in the wind, sometimes he awoke certain they were near, only to find the world unchanged. One morning, a package arrived at the boy's house, a weathered envelope with no return address. Inside were photos, wolves running through deep forests, a mother and cubs near a distant lake, paw prints in wet earth beside fresh deer tracks. A note was tucked in. They made it. I followed as far as I could. They're together, safe. Your friends are free. It was signed with a single initial, G. The biologist guessed it was a fellow researcher, someone tracking endangered wolves across the continent. Sometimes, when people know a story is important, they find ways to keep it alive, she told the boy. Inspired, the boy began to speak about his experience wherever he could. He shared his story at school, wrote letters to lawmakers, and was even invited to speak at a wildlife conference in the city. The video of his speech, "The Wolves Who Saved Me," spread across the internet, moving hearts around the world. Other towns reached out, asking for advice on how to live with wild animals in their midst. Conservation groups used the story to rally support for wolf protection. A foundation was started in the boy's name, funding radio collars and wildlife corridors all along the mountain ranges. The wolves themselves became legend, symbols of hope, courage, and the strange, fierce love that can exist between worlds. Their howls, once feared, were now celebrated. Artists painted murals, children wrote stories, and elders told new versions of the tale beside winter fires. Still, not everyone believed. Skeptics and cynics scoffed, and some hunters still grumbled about lost livestock. But the tide had turned. Compassion, for a time, had triumphed. One evening, as the boy sat on the porch, a gust of wind carried a familiar scent. Earth, pine, wildness. He closed his eyes, listening. From somewhere, impossibly distant, came the echo of two wolves howling at the rising moon. He smiled, knowing that wherever they roamed, their story was not over. Not for him, not for the mountains, not for anyone who had been changed by what happened that winter. But as spring approached and the snow began to melt, a new rumor spread. A wolf with a radio collar and her grey companion had been spotted far to the north, near another village where children had gone missing. The boy's heart leapt with hope and worry. Their journey wasn't done. Something new and dangerous awaited the wolves, and their bond with humankind would be tested once more. Spring crept up the valleys, softening the last of the snow and bringing color back to the world. The village moved on, but the boy never forgot. He followed every whisper and rumor, tracking the story of the wolves as it traveled north, through radio chatter, online forums, and the rare letters that still arrived. One afternoon, the biologist hurried to his house, her face lit with excitement and concern. "They've been spotted, near Pine Hollow, 100 miles north. The black wolf's collar pinged twice last night, but..." She hesitated. "There are missing children up there. People are scared." The boy's heart twisted. He knew his wolves would never hurt a child. But fear, once born, spread quickly. He and his mother called the sheriff, who agreed to drive them to Pine Hollow with the biologist. The journey was long, winding through mountains dusted with fresh green and villages where the old fears had never died. At Pine Hollow, the town was tense. Armed patrols stalked the woods, and every mother kept her children close. The search for the missing children had brought the local authorities deep into the forests. In their wake, rumors had blossomed. Wolves hunting at the edge of town, wild shapes seen by moonlight, even a ghost wolf leading the pack. The boy, his mother, and the biologist met with the local sheriff, a wary man named Carter. "I don't want to panic, but people here are scared. If those wolves come near, they won't get a second chance." Together, they joined the search. The woods were thick, the ground muddy with spring melt. The boy listened for any sign, a distant howl, a snapped twig, anything to tell him he was on the right path. Then, as dusk fell, they found the children, two siblings, cold but unharmed, sitting beside a fallen log, and curled protectively around them, as if standing guard, were the black wolf and the gray wolf. The boy rushed forward, tears springing to his eyes. "It's them!" The black wolf lifted her head, meeting his gaze with calm golden eyes. The children clung to her, their fear soothed by the wolves' presence. "They kept us warm," the older child whispered. "They chased away the wild dogs." The adults stood in awe, disbelief softening to wonder. The biologist documented everything: photos, videos, even a recording of the children describing their rescue. "This is beyond rare," she told the local sheriff. "You're looking at something extraordinary, cooperation across worlds." But as word spread, a familiar pattern unfolded. Some celebrated the wolves as heroes, others muttered about unnatural beasts. A handful of angry men gathered in the shadows, vowing to protect the town their own way. That night, the boy and his mother stayed with the rescued children, telling stories of the winter when the wolves had saved him. The black wolf limped to his side and lay down, resting her head in his lap, the radio collar still blinking faintly. But danger was never far. In the darkness, a group of men loaded rifles and set out into the woods. They meant to end the story once and for all. The biologist, alert to trouble, woke the sheriff. "If anything happens to those wolves, this whole country will hear about it. And if you let it happen, you'll answer to more than just your voters." Sheriff Carter hesitated, then rallied his deputies. They moved quietly through the woods, searching for the vigilantes before tragedy could strike. In the pre-dawn gray, shots rang out, echoing through the trees. The wolves, ever alert, fled with the children and the boy deep into a thicket. The black wolf, slowed by her injury, stumbled and fell. The boy knelt beside her, sobbing, as the gray wolf stood guard, teeth bared and eyes fierce. "Stay with me," he begged. "Don't go." The biologist and deputies reached them just in time, forming a human shield between the wolves and the hunters. "Not another step," the sheriff barked. "You'll answer for this in court." Tensions flared, but the townspeople arrived, led by the mothers of the rescued children. "These wolves are heroes," one shouted. "They saved our babies. Leave them be." The vigilantes, outnumbered and shamed, retreated. As the sun rose, painting the woods gold, the black wolf struggled to her feet. The boy pressed his forehead to hers, whispering thanks. But the wound from the trap and now the bullet left her weak. The villagers gathered around, torn between hope and fear, as the wolves' fate and the fragile peace between worlds hung in the balance. The morning light found the little clearing crowded with people, mothers clutching their children, deputies standing tense, the boy kneeling beside the black wolf. For a moment, all was still except for the wolf's labored breathing and the gentle hush of wind in the trees. The biologist knelt by the boy, gently examining the black wolf's wound. "She's lost blood, but if we act quickly, she can survive." With quiet authority, she instructed the villagers to fetch blankets, water, and her first aid kit from the truck. Remarkably, the townsfolk obeyed. Gone was the suspicion that had followed every rumor and shadow. In its place was a cautious hope, a sense that the boundary between wild and human could be crossed with kindness. Sheriff Carter called for an emergency veterinarian, using his own name to vouch for the wolves' safety. "Nobody touches these animals unless it's to help them," he declared, and his deputies formed a loose circle around the boy, his mother, the biologist, and the wolves. The rescued children sat close, hugging the wolves' thick fur. "They stayed all night," the little girl told her mother. "They chased away the scary dogs and let us sleep." News spread quickly. Reporters arrived, cameras rolling, capturing images of the village rallying to protect the animals they had once feared. Interviews with the children and the boy, now called the Wolf's Child by the national press, moved audiences everywhere. When the vet arrived, the black wolf tensed but allowed the boy and the biologist to calm her. With steady hands, the vet cleaned the wound, stitched the flesh, and administered antibiotics. The procedure was rough but necessary. Through it all, the grey wolf watched, a silent guardian, ready to defend or flee at a moment's notice. Afterward, the wolves rested beneath a tree, children and villagers taking turns sitting nearby. People left bowls of water, scraps of food, even soft blankets. What had started as an emergency became a vigil, a community choosing to honor what they had witnessed, rather than give in to old fears. As the day wore on, the biologist addressed the crowd. What you've seen here isn't just rare, it's historic. We have a responsibility to protect these wolves and make sure they have a future. The governor himself called the town. We'll provide a protected reserve for the wolves and launch a national campaign for wildlife coexistence. Your village will be an example to the world. At sunset, a small ceremony took place. The boy, holding the tuft of fur, spoke with simple honesty. The wolves saved me when I was alone. They saved these children too. They didn't hurt anyone. They just wanted to live like all of us. One by one, villagers offered thanks, apologies, and wishes for healing. The mothers of the rescued children placed flower garlands around the wolves' necks. Even some of the hunters, ashamed of what nearly happened, pledged to watch over the new reserve. The black wolf slowly regained strength, her eyes never leaving the boy's face. The grey wolf nuzzled his hand, a silent promise of trust. As darkness settled, the wolves rose, ready to return to the deep forest. But this time, they left with the blessing of the village, not its fear. The boy watched them go, tears shining in his eyes. Not of sadness, but of awe. He knew he would never forget them, and that their story would change more than just his small town. That night, as the village celebrated, a message arrived from a distant city, a request from scientists, conservationists, and filmmakers wanting to share the wolves' story with the world. The boy smiled, realizing that the wolves' journey was now a legend, inspiring others far beyond the mountains. But he also knew that with every legend comes responsibility and new challenges waiting on the horizon. Within weeks, the story of the wolves and the children swept across continents. News outlets broadcast images of the black and grey wolves resting among the wildflowers, of the boy with his arm around their thick fur, of a once divided village standing together beneath the shadow of ancient pines. Everywhere, people debated, wept, and wondered. Could wildness and humanity really share trust? Researchers and filmmakers arrived, careful not to disturb the fragile balance. They documented the wolves from a respectful distance, using hidden cameras and silent drones. They interviewed villagers, rescuers, and the boy, whose honest words carried a power that no adult could match. Wolves aren't monsters. They're brave and scared and loving like us. If we hurt what's wild, we hurt ourselves. International conservation groups poured in support, funding not just the reserve, but also wildlife corridors and new education programs. The governor's office named the valley a sanctuary, and other regions began to consider similar protections. The biologist became a local hero, giving talks in schools and advising on projects far beyond her mountain home. The sheriff, once wary, took pride in defending the wolves' legacy. The boy's mother, who had once feared for her son's life, now led a committee to teach coexistence to future generations. And the wolves, black and grey, bonded by hardship, became symbols. Their images adorned postage stamps, murals, and children's books. Songs were written, dances performed, legends spun anew around campfires from Alaska to the Alps. Still, the wolves themselves remained wild. The collar's beacon blinked now and then from deep in the protected forest, a reminder that these animals belong to no one. Sometimes, the boy would hear their distant howls, mournful, joyful, full of the wild promise that had once saved his life. He missed them, of course. Sometimes, on still nights, he would sit at the edge of the woods, humming softly, hoping for a glimpse of silver or black fur between the trees. The wolves would sometimes watch from a distance, yellow eyes shining in the dusk, but they never approached. Their trust had been given, not bought. Their story belonged to all, but their lives remained their own. As the seasons turned, tourists came to learn and volunteers helped restore the old forest. Scientists documented a small resurgence of other rare animals, lynx, eagles, even wildflowers long thought gone. The mountains, it seemed, were healing. Yet even as the world celebrated, new questions stirred. Other towns reached out, asking for advice as their own wolves or bears returned. Skeptics remained, warning that trust could be broken in a moment. The boy listened to every voice, but always returned to the lesson the wolves had taught him: to be brave even when you are afraid, to protect what is rare, to answer cruelty with kindness, but never forget what was risked for trust. One late summer evening, as fireflies blinked and villagers gathered for a festival in the wolves' honor, the boy took the stage. He spoke not just for his friends, but for every creature living in the margins. If we listen to the wild, if we're gentle and patient, there's no telling what we can learn or what we can save. My friends taught me that. The world is watching us now. Let's make sure the story they see is one we're proud to tell. As applause faded and lanterns glowed in the trees, the biologist hurried to the boy with urgent news. A new pack has been spotted far beyond the valley, wolves with black and gray coats like your friends. Some say there's even a white cub among them. The boy's eyes shone. Maybe, he whispered, this is just the beginning. The next weeks felt like a miracle reborn. News of the new pack traveled swiftly across mountains, through research stations, into the halls of government and the hearts of ordinary people. The boy could hardly sleep, his mind alive with hope. Had his wolves truly found others of their kind? Was the white cub real, or just another story growing in the fertile soil of legend? The biologist, now a respected voice in national conservation, led a team deep into the protected valleys. Motion-triggered cameras captured fleeting images. The black wolf, healed and strong, leading the pack beside the gray wolf. Behind them, unmistakable, was a smaller figure, fur like morning frost, eyes bright with curiosity. The valley echoed with the howls of many, not just two. Life had returned, wild and glorious. Villagers, once divided, now stood together, some in tears, watching footage projected on a white sheet in the village square. The story that had started with a single child's rescue now belonged to everyone. Elderly men who once hunted wolves offered apologies and prayers. Children carried stuffed animals, whispering thank you into the dusk. The governor, accompanied by journalists and educators, visited the sanctuary. This valley has taught the world that even the deepest fears can give way to respect, that enemies can become protectors, she said. It began with a boy and two wolves, and now it's a lesson for all of us. But the journey was not without tension. Poachers and skeptics lingered at the reserve's edge. One night, a trap was found near the border. Illegal, cruel, a stark reminder that old habits died hard. The sheriff doubled patrols. Volunteers took shifts, watching over the land they now called sacred. The boy, taller and more confident, became the valley's quiet champion. He visited the forest often, sometimes alone, sometimes with his mother, sometimes with crowds of schoolchildren who listened in awe to his story. He taught them how to listen for the wolves' howls, how to read their tracks in soft earth, how to leave offerings of thanks and respect. And sometimes when the wind was just right, he would glimpse the black wolf watching from the shadows, her yellow eyes warm with memory. The gray wolf would appear at her side, and once, incredibly, the white cub peeked out, awkward and bold. For a moment, the boy's heart felt light as air. Every hardship, every risk, every lonely night had led to this. International attention grew, documentaries were filmed, research papers published, and wildlife corridors mapped from one protected valley to another. Other countries sent delegates to learn from the wolf village. Laws were passed, linking communities, governments, and wild places in a chain of care. But for all the grand speeches and celebrations, the heart of the story remained simple. It was about a child, two wolves, and a choice to meet fear with compassion. The bond that began on a snowy night had changed the fate of an entire region and inspired thousands to look at the wild with new eyes. One evening, as summer faded and the first leaves turned gold, the boy sat on his porch beneath a sky filled with stars. He heard the howls, a chorus now, strong and hopeful. His mother joined him, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. "Do you miss them?" she asked. He nodded, smiling. "Every day. But I know they're not gone. They're home. And now, so am I." They sat in silence, listening as the howls echoed across the hills, the sound carrying a promise that trust, once earned, could echo for generations. The valley slept peacefully that night, the wolves safe and the future bright. The story would live on, not just in books and broadcasts, but in every act of courage, every choice to protect, every whisper of gratitude that followed the wild into tomorrow. As dawn painted the sky, the biologist returned from the forest breathless. "The white cub has grown," she said, eyes shining, "and now there are signs of more. A new generation is coming." The boy felt tears in his eyes, not of loss, but of wonder. The wild had not just survived, it was thriving. Time passed, and the valley flourished. What once had been a place of fear and secrecy became a beacon of hope, a living example of how wildness and humanity could heal together. Each season brought something new. Wildflowers returning to slopes long bare, rare birds nesting near streams, the distant, confident songs of wolves echoing across the ridges. The story of the boy and the wolves inspired visitors from around the world. School children planted trees, painted murals, and hiked into the woods to listen for howls. Scientists came to study the recovering ecosystem. Conservationists built safe corridors that linked valleys, allowing wildlife to roam and thrive. The village prospered, not just in spirit but in community. People learned to coexist with the wild neighbors they once feared. Workshops taught shepherds and farmers how to protect their flocks without harming predators. Ranchers found new pride in living alongside the world's rarest wolves, knowing their efforts had given the land a second chance. The boy, now a young man, became a quiet leader. He guided hikes, answered reporters' questions, and wrote letters to leaders in distant places, sharing his belief that the wild isn't something to conquer, it's something to understand. The tuft of grey fur stayed with him always, a reminder that small acts of kindness can ripple across generations. The black wolf, the grey wolf, and the white cub became symbols in stories and songs, celebrated in festivals every spring. Elders told and retold the legend, weaving in new chapters each year. The wolves were never tamed, never kept, but respected as kin, whose fate was tied to the courage of one boy, a family, and a community that chose hope over fear. As the years turned, the young man sometimes caught glimpses of the wolves at dusk, always at a respectful distance, always watching. The white cub, now grown and leading a family of its own, would meet his eyes for a moment before melting into the trees. On the 10th anniversary of that first snowy rescue, the village gathered beneath lantern-lit pines. The young man spoke with gratitude, his words echoing through the clear mountain air. "We all share this story now. It belongs to every child who listens for a howl, every mother who welcomes change, every neighbor who chooses to trust." The wolves gave us a second chance, not just at saving a species, but at being better stewards of this world. May we always listen, learn, and keep our promises to what is wild. That night, as music and laughter mingled with the sounds of nature, the wolves howled from far-off ridges. An answer, a benediction, a promise that their story was never truly finished. And in that moment, the young man understood. The wild had not only survived, it had changed everyone who dared to care. If this story touched your heart, help it reach others. Share this video to celebrate the courage of wildness, the power of trust, and the hope that even one voice, human or animal, can make a difference. Subscribe for more real-life stories of compassion, courage, and the bonds between humans and the wild. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. And thank you, from the wolves and from all of us, for being part of their journey home.